Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Understanding VoIP webinar. VoIP stands for Voice over Internet Protocol and is the method that we deliver the calls to the handsets within the practice. So during this session, we're going to be having a look at cloud telephony and what the differences are there for you. We're going to look at the equipment that you'll have within the practice and where that will be. So we'll look at the comms room and your comms cabinet, and also the equipment that you'll find around the desk. We'll also briefly look at what you can do if there are any issues with the phone system in the practice. So cloud telephony is the method in which Surgery Connect is supplied to your particular practice. And the old legacy way, you would have had individual lines for every number coming into the practice, and the majority of the equipment to sort those calls out to the different extensions would have been actually in the practice itself. So all your calls would come into the practice, and all your messages and any menu options that you have for the patients would all be handled within equipment in the practice. Now that limited what you could actually achieve, because you would need physical lines to actually come into the practice if you wanted more extensions or more numbers. With the cloud technology, we actually move a lot of the equipment and all the brains of the operation to our servers at Exxon, which means that all the calls are answered by the system, all your messages are given, and menu options are actually given before that call gets to the practice. Once the calls have been sorted and they're then in the queues that you want them in, that's when the calls would then be passed over to the practice via the broadband line. So the equipment that you're going to have within the practice will be a router. So you'll see an Exxon router, which is usually a white router that looks like this, and a switch. So the router will decode your broadband signal and then push it through the switch, which will then send it out to the different extensions within the practice. Both the router and the switch are normally in the comms room or in a comms cabinet, depending on how large the practice is. And we can see here that we've got our Exxon router. So we have the Exxon router here, showing at the back here so that you can actually see the ports in the back. That's connected via an Ethernet cable then to the switch. And the router actually provides the power for the switch as well via power over the Ethernet cable there. Once they're installed, the router will normally sit on top of the switch. You can see the Ethernet cable here that's connecting it to the switch. And then we have cables and ports that go out to the extensions in the practice. This switch here is actually into a patch, which is part of the original equipment that was in the practice that has the extensions connected to it on the other end. So this is our router installed within the comms cabinet. So we've got the router here at the top. We've got our switches here, and we've got more than one switch, as this particular practice has more extensions than one switch can handle. So there's 24 different ports on each switch. So if you need more extensions than that, you will see more than one switch there. Both switches are connected in tandem then to the router. This is the cabling that is then going off to the extensions within the practice. So that would be the handsets on the desks via the ports on the wall. Down at the bottom of the picture here, you can actually see the broadband microfilter. So this is where the broadband is coming into the practice, and that's connected to the back of the router via a DSL cable. So that's the black cable that you'll see going from the microfilter to the router itself. And that's how the broadband is connected to the practice for Surgery Connect. Around the desks, you're then going to have ports on the wall, and the numbers on the ports would normally match the ports on the switch so that we know which extension goes into which port on the switch. On your desks, you'll have your handsets, either a T21 or the T27, and on the back of the handset, there will be some sockets there, and you'll connect the phone to the port in the wall using an Ethernet cable. On the back of the phone, there are different sockets there. So the Ethernet cable will be plugged into the internet socket on the phone, and that then means that will then provide both power and calls to that particular extension. So there's no need then for an additional power cable into those phones, so they won't need to be plugged into the mains at all. They can just be powered via the Ethernet cable coming through the switch and the patch and the router in your comms room. Now, if you have any issues with the handsets themselves, so you see perhaps a no service message, the first thing to do will be to check the other handsets. If all the handsets are showing a no service message, before you contact support, you can actually reboot the router within the comms room, and that may reboot the system and then bring the service back for you. If there's only the one handset that's showing no service, then you can check the ports in the wall by swapping the handset for one that you know already works. So if you just unplug the phone from the wall, make sure that the phone that you know is working goes into exactly the same port. If that then shows no service, then we know the problem is with the port or with the cabling behind that port. If that shows service, then the port's okay, and the problem's with the phone. Again, you could check that just by plugging that into a port that you then know works, just to make sure that you're still getting that no service message on the phone. If you do need to reboot the router within the comms cabinet, then on the back of the router there is a switch. If that's accessible, you can just switch it off using that switch there. If you can't access the switch because it's too tight in the cabinet, you can just unplug the power pack to the back of the router. Make sure you leave the router off for at least 10 seconds before switching it back on and allowing the system to reboot. If that doesn't resolve the issue, then please contact the support team, either by giving them a call or by raising a ticket through the support portal. So during the session, we've had a brief overview there of cloud telephony. We've looked at the equipment that you will see in the comms room and in the cabinet. We've also looked at the equipment that you'll have around the desk and looked briefly at any issues that you may have.